They mention that temptation doesn't arrive with a loud knock at your door. Instead, it sneaks in gently, like a soft breeze through a small window gap. It's subtle, almost harmless. There's no warning sign, no flashing lights or alarms. Sometimes it appears as a familiar face, or sounds like laughter echoing in your own home. And sometimes it takes the form of your husband's closest friend. I still recall the heaviness of the night air that evening, still and calm like the quiet before a storm. The house was dimly lit, peaceful in a way that makes you forget that tranquility can be deceptive. You assume peace means safety. But for me that night, peace was the silence before my world shattered. Months have passed, and I still replay it in my mind. How it began, how subtle it was, creeping in one glance at a time, one laugh too long, one moment too close. You know, I used to believe I was the kind of woman who had everything under control. Married, a beautiful home, stability, the kind of life you showcase on social media that others envy without knowing the reality behind the images. But inside, I was slowly falling apart, like a loose thread on a sweater that you keep pulling, not realizing it's the one thing holding everything together. He noticed it before I did. My husband's best friend. He saw what even my own husband hadn't seen in years. That behind my smile, behind the I'm fine, was a woman craving something real. I didn't plan for this. I didn't wake up one day thinking I'd become that woman. The one who crosses the line, who says yes when she should have walked away. But life doesn't always ask you to plan. Sometimes it just places you in a moment and waits to see who you really are when no one's watching. And that night, I saw a version of myself I didn't recognize. Or maybe I saw the version of myself I had buried for years. The version who wanted to feel wanted. Who wanted to feel seen. And he looked at me like I wasn't invisible. Like I hadn't faded into the background of my own life. We were alone. My husband was away. Just the two of us in that dim kitchen. Half lit by the warm yellow of the stove light. The sound of the clock ticking louder than ever. The smell of wine and old memories between us. He leaned in just a little, just enough to blur the lines of what should have been casual. And then he said it. There's something I've always wanted. He looked me dead in the eye. Not a smirk, not a joke, no laughter to brush it off. Just raw, open truth hanging between us like fog. And you know what? I didn't stop him. I could have. I should have. But I didn't. And that's the moment everything changed. Soft piano music swells in the background. Subscribe to heartfelt tales. Unfold to uncover the hidden stories we rarely dare to speak about. Because what happens next? You won't believe it and you won't forget it. I didn't stop him. And once you don't stop something, it starts to grow. Not in loud, obvious ways, but in quiet ones. The kind that sneak up on you while you're folding laundry. Staring out the window, lying next to a husband who's right there but feels miles away. Let me take you back before that night, before the moment that changed everything. I'm 38, been married for almost 12 years. We have 2 kids, a nice home in the suburbs, the kind of life people call comfortable. You know what that word really means? Predictable, repetitive, quiet in all the wrong places. My husband Mark is a good man, a provider, solid. He works hard, always has. But somewhere along the way, we stopped seeing each other. Not in a dramatic shouting match kind of way. More like the lights dim slowly until we were sitting in the dark and forgot we used to have light. He'd come home late, tired. Always tired. Talked more to his phone than he did to me. I stopped asking where he'd been. stopped hoping for a hug that lasted more than 2 seconds. We became polite roommates, functional co-parents, business partners in this thing called marriage. And that's when Daniel started showing up more. Daniel's been Mark's best friend since college. He's always been around for holidays, birthdays, family trips. The kind of friend who doesn't knock anymore, just walks in, grabs a beer, flops onto the couch. Everyone loves him. The kids adore him. And honestly, I always liked him too. But it was harmless. Always harmless until it wasn't. I started noticing things. The way his eyes lingered just a second longer. The way he really listened when I talked, not the distracted, nodding without hearing kind of listening I'd gotten used to. Real listening. Like my words had weight again. He'd help clean up after dinner, crack a joke to make me laugh, lean a little too close when he handed me a dish. It was subtle. So subtle I told myself I was imagining it. But deep down, I knew I wasn't. I remember one night we were all sitting outside, kids playing in the yard. My days had started blending together. Wake up, make breakfast, pack lunches, work, pick up the kids, cook, clean, sleep, repeat. Mark and I barely spoke, unless it was about bills or schedules. We hadn't touched each other, really touched each other in so long I stopped counting. But Daniel was like a reminder of what it felt like to be noticed, desired, alive. And the worst part, I didn't push it away. I let it happen in small ways, lingering in the kitchen with him, laughing a little too hard at his jokes, standing a little too close. I told myself it was nothing. I needed to believe it was nothing. But it wasn't nothing. It was everything I didn't even realize I missed. I'd go to bed at night next to Mark, my back to him, wondering if he noticed how quiet I'd become. He never asked. He never reached for me, and I stopped reaching for him. One afternoon, I watched Daniel from the kitchen window as he fixed the kid's tire swing. His sleeves were rolled up. He was laughing with my son, wiping sweat from his forehead. He looked up and saw me watching, and he smiled. Not a casual smile, not a hey neighbor kind of smile. It was soft, personal, and I smiled back. That smile was the beginning of the end, because from that moment on, I couldn't unsee it. I started wearing lipstick again, just a little. Started doing my hair, even if I wasn't going anywhere. Started feeling like a woman again, not just a caretaker. And I hated myself for it. But I also craved it. Is that so wrong to want to feel wanted? To feel like you matter? Like you're not just some background character in your own life? I always thought loyalty came easily to me. I really did, until I started feeling seen again. And that's when I realized loyalty is easy when no one's tempting you to feel alive. I wish I could say I stopped it then. That I cut ties, created distance, talked to my husband, fought for my marriage. But I didn't, because part of me was already gone. And Daniel, he could feel it too. It was a Saturday, one of those picture-perfect suburban weekends that look better on the outside than they feel on the inside. We were hosting a barbecue. The grill was sizzling. The kids were running around with popsicles, and music played low from a Bluetooth speaker near the patio. Friends, neighbors, laughter. It was all there, all the ingredients for a beautiful day. And for a while, I let myself believe we were okay. Mark was charming in front of guests as usual. He played the host well, beer in hand, cracking jokes, flipping burgers. But even in the middle of the crowd, I could feel the distance between us. It's a strange thing to be married and still feel invisible, like you're sitting across from someone who looks right through you. And then, of course, work called like it always did. Mark stepped away, phone pressed to his ear, disappearing into the house. He said it would be quick, but it never was. An hour passed, maybe more. People noticed, but no one said anything. They just laughed, kept drinking, and pretended everything was fine. But Daniel saw it. He always did. He caught my eye across the yard while I was clearing plates off the patio table. Just a glance, but it lingered. He followed me into the kitchen quietly, like he knew I wouldn't ask for help, but needed it anyway. I didn't protest. We stood at the sink together, side by side, rinsing dishes. The kitchen was quiet except for the soft clink of silverware and the murmur of voices outside. I could hear Mark's voice faintly in the other room, still on the phone. Daniel handed me a plate. I rinsed. We worked in rhythm, like we'd done this 1,000 times. It felt oddly intimate. Not romantic, just close, safe, familiar. And then out of nowhere, he said it. Do you ever feel like you're fading into the background? My hand stopped moving. The sponge hovered over a glass, water running. I didn't answer right away, because I felt it too deeply. The truth of it hit me like a wave I hadn't braced for. He looked at me waiting, and I just said, yeah, all the time. There was a silence after that, heavy but not uncomfortable. More like shared understanding, like we were both sitting in the same quiet sadness. I kept scrubbing the glass, trying not to think too hard. But then his hand brushed mine, just lightly, just enough to feel warm. I should have pulled away, should have laughed it off or made a joke, should have stepped back. But I didn't. I didn't move at all. He didn't say anything, just let the moment hang there like a secret between us that neither of us wanted to name. I looked at him, and he looked right back. Longer than he should have, longer than a friend is supposed to. And I didn't look away. My heart was racing, but my body didn't move. It's like I was frozen in place, caught between guilt and something else, something I didn't want to admit I'd been longing for. I remained silent when his hand grazed mine, and I stayed quiet when he gazed at me a moment too long. That quiet was more powerful than any words either of us could have spoken. After that evening in the kitchen, things didn't return to how they were before. Not truly. Daniel didn't mention what happened, and neither did I. But there was a change, subtle, quiet, but undeniable. You could sense it in the pauses between words, in the glances that lasted too long, in the air that felt heavier whenever we were together. He began appearing more frequently. Initially, it didn't seem unusual. He was Mark's best friend after all. No one thought twice about it, not even Mark. But I noticed how he would stop by in the middle of the day with some excuse. He'd say he forgot something the last time he was over, or that he was just passing through the neighborhood. Sometimes he'd bring coffee or lunch or help me with groceries without being asked. Each visit felt increasingly personal. He would linger at the doorway, looking around as if memorizing the details of my life. Our conversations shifted from casual to intimate. Not romantic, not yet, but emotional. He started asking me questions no one had in a long time. What do you want these days? What makes you happy? Questions that touched parts of me I didn't even know were still alive. And I answered, not just with words, but with sighs, with long pauses, with truths I didn't even want to admit to myself. Things I hadn't shared with anyone, not even Mark. Then came the business trip. Mark was leaving for 4 days, some client meeting in another state. He barely looked up when he told me. just listed off the flight details like he was reading a grocery list, kissed me on the cheek out of habit. No eye contact, no warmth. I nodded, told him to travel safe, and that was it. The first night without him, the house was quiet. Too quiet. The kids were with their grandparents for the weekend, so it was just me alone, surrounded by stillness. And then Daniel knocked. He had a bottle of wine in one hand and a crooked smile on his face. "I didn't want you to feel alone," he said. And just like that, he was inside. I should have said no. I know that. I should have thanked him and sent him on his way. But I didn't because the truth is I was feeling alone, more than I'd ever admit out loud. And he knew it. We sat on the couch just talking. The wine flowed slowly. So did the conversation. It started with laughter, funny stories from college, embarrassing moments, memories that were safe to share. But somewhere between the second glass and the way his voice dropped to a softer tone, things changed. He told me I looked different lately, more alive. I felt my stomach tighten when he said it because I knew what he meant, and I knew it wasn't innocent. I told him I'd started painting again, that I'd picked up an old canvas from the garage and just started letting the colors speak. He smiled like he already knew, like he could see the change in me without needing proof. And then came the confession. He looked at me, eyes low and steady, and he said, "I've always admired you. Even back then, I used to wonder what would have happened if things had been different." My heart stopped, because it was the first time he'd said anything that couldn't be disguised as casual. There was no pretending after that. He wasn't talking like a friend. He was talking like a man who wanted something he hadn't allowed himself to say until now. And I should have stopped him. I should have changed the subject, stood up, done something. But I didn't. I just sat there frozen. He leaned in slowly, giving me time to pull away, giving me every chance to say no. But I didn't move. I didn't say a word. And when his lips met mine, soft and hesitant, I let them stay. It was a kiss that didn't ask for permission out loud, but waited for it in silence. And I gave it. I told myself it was only a kiss. Just one. But deep down, I knew everything had already changed. Daniel's birthday came quicker than I expected. I hadn't even realized how close it was until Mark mentioned it over breakfast. "We should have him over," he said, casually flipping through emails on his phone. "He's basically family." And just like that, it was decided. A quiet dinner at our place. Nothing big, just us, the kids, and Daniel. I said, yes. But inside, I felt something stir. Not excitement, not dread, just tension. A tightness in my chest I couldn't name. That evening, I cooked more than usual. I told myself it was just to make the night special. But the truth, I was nervous. I curled my hair, added a little eyeliner, wore a dress I hadn't put on in over a year. I wanted to look good, not just presentable, wanted. The moment he walked through the door, I felt it again. That quiet pull. He brought flowers for me, said it was a birthday tradition. He always gives something instead of just getting. Mark laughed, called him a sentimental fool, and poured drinks. Dinner was easy, light, filled with stories and laughter. Daniel was his usual charming self, teasing the kids, complimenting the food, making jokes that kept the air light. But underneath it all, I felt it. That undercurrent of something unspoken. It was in the way he glanced at me when no one was looking. The way his fingers brushed mine when he passed a plate. Nothing overt, but everything intentional. After dinner, the kids went to bed. Mark, as expected, got a work call, stepped out to take it, said he'd only be a minute. He was gone for nearly an hour. Daniel and I stayed in the living room. The dishes were still on the table. The music had faded. And suddenly, it was just us alone again, like always. He didn't say anything at first, just sat there on the couch, sipping the last of his wine. I sat across from him, pretending to scroll through my phone, pretending not to feel the weight of his silence. Then he spoke. "For my birthday," he said, voice low, eyes steady. "I have a wish. Just one." I looked up slowly, my mouth open but nothing came out. He didn't smile, didn't laugh. He meant it. I felt a chill crawl down my spine. I tried to deflect. I really did. "Oh, come on," I said, forcing a smile. "Don't get all mysterious on me now." But he just looked at me, still quiet, serious, and I knew what he meant before he even said it. I looked away. "You shouldn't," I whispered. "I know," he said. "But I still do." The silence between us swelled, full of everything we hadn't said, everything we tried to ignore. My heartbeat was loud in my ears, my throat dry. My hand shook just slightly, resting in my lap. He stood up slowly, walked over, sat beside me. I didn't move. He didn't touch me. He didn't need to. The tension wrapped around us like a blanket, hot, suffocating, familiar. "I've tried to stay away," he said, "but I can't pretend anymore." I looked at him, and then I looked past him toward the hallway, where Mark was still talking in the other room, completely unaware. I should have stopped it. I should have stood up, walked away, but I didn't. I looked back at Daniel and I said it. "Okay, just this once." He didn't wait, and I didn't resist. What happened next wasn't rushed. It wasn't wild. It wasn't anything like I thought it would be. It was quiet, careful, sad. It was two people searching for something they couldn't name. And for a little while, we found it. But even as it was happening, I knew we were crossing a line we couldn't uncross. I could feel it in the way his breath caught, in the way my hands trembled, in the ache that bloomed in my chest. This wasn't a beginning. This was the unraveling. And once it started, there was no stitching it back together. That night changed everything. And not in the way I expected. Not in the way I wanted. Just in the way it had to. The morning after was still not peaceful, not comforting, just still. I woke up early before the sun even rose with that strange hollow feeling in my chest, like something inside me had shifted and couldn't shift back. Daniel was already up, dressed, sitting at the edge of the couch, staring at the floor like the answers might be hiding in the wood grain. He didn't look at me, not once, and I didn't say anything either. He mumbled something about having to get going, that he had an early meeting. It was vague, quiet, rushed, like he couldn't get out of the house fast enough. I stood there wrapped in my robe, gripping the edge of the doorway, watching him leave without turning around. The front door clicked shut, and that was it. No goodbye, no closure, just silence. I stood there long after he left, listening to the emptiness he left behind, trying to catch my breath, trying to make sense of what had just happened. My body still remembered his hands, his voice, the weight of him. But my heart felt strange. Not broken, not whole either, just confused. There was this twisted mix of emotions sitting heavy on my chest. Shame and something else I didn't want to admit out loud. Thrill, regret, sadness, and maybe even grief. Because I think I thought it would feel different. I don't know what I expected. Maybe a rush, a flood of passion, that would make everything make sense. Or maybe I thought it would fill some hole inside me that had been aching for so long. But instead, I just felt empty. And the worst part, Mark came home that morning and kissed me on the forehead like nothing had happened. Like his best friend hadn't touched me in the place he hadn't touched in months. He dropped his suitcase by the door, complained about the flight, asked what the kids had been up to, and I stood in the kitchen nodding, smiling, playing along like I wasn't crumbling inside. I watched him talk, and all I could think was, he has no idea. He has no idea who I've become, who I already was long before last night ever happened. For a few days, I tried to push it aside, pretend it didn't matter, pretend I could compartmentalize what Daniel and I did, that it was a mistake, something to bury, something that would fade if I didn't give it air. But the silence that followed said otherwise. Daniel didn't come around after that. No texts, no visits, no excuses to drop by. He disappeared, and the space he left behind, it felt louder than anything. I found myself staring at the door around the time he used to show up, waiting for the knock that never came, replaying our last words, wondering if I misread it all. Was I just a fantasy he needed to play out? A birthday wish he could make and walk away from because he got what he wanted. But me, I didn't feel satisfied. I felt cast aside, exploited, and that pain cut deeper than I anticipated. I'd find myself staring at my phone late into the night, waiting for a message that never arrived, listening to Mark's steady breathing beside me, oblivious, untouched, unchanged. And I'd question myself, what did I do? What did I think this would solve? Because now I wasn't just lonely. I was filled with shame, alone in a more profound way. He got what he desired. So why did it feel like I had lost something? After Daniel vanished, something within me went silent. Not in a tranquil way, more like the quiet after an explosion when all you're left with is a ringing in your ears. I went through the days in a daze, cooked, cleaned, smiled when expected. But I wasn't truly present. Not really. And perhaps I hadn't been present for a long time. Maybe I just didn't realize it. Until I crossed a line I couldn't uncross. I began asking myself the tough questions, the ones I'd avoided for years. Questions that stuck in my throat like shards of glass. Why did I do it? Was it love? Was it revenge? Was it just desperation? Maybe I just wanted to feel something. Anything. Because feeling invisible is like a slow death. You don't even realize you're fading away until there's barely anything left to see in the mirror. Mark didn't notice the change in me. Or if he did, he didn't mention it. He'd still come home, kiss me on the cheek, ask what was for dinner. We still sat across from each other at the table, like strangers pretending to play house. But inside, I was slipping away. I stopped trying to connect. I stopped reaching out. I stopped hoping for anything more than what we already were. And that coldness became my shield. Some nights after everyone had gone to bed, I'd sit in the living room, alone, and pull out old photo albums, watch videos on my phone from our early days. I'd stare at the version of myself who used to laugh so easily, who used to grab Mark's hand in public, who believed that love was enough. And I'd cry, not loudly, not dramatically, just soft tears that came in silence and left salt on my lips. Because I missed her, the woman I used to be. I missed believing in the kind of love that didn't leave you empty. I started writing again. Not stories, not essays, just pieces of myself. Little entries in a notebook I kept hidden in the back of my closet. My only place, to be honest. One night, I wrote. I gave into a moment, But now I'm trapped in a lifetime of what ifs. What if I had said no? What if I had stopped Daniel when I had the chance? What if I had spoken up in my marriage before I got this far? But more than anything, what if I never feel seen again? That's what it came down to. I didn't want a different man. I didn't want to ruin my life. I just wanted someone to look at me like I mattered. Like I was more than just a woman behind the scenes, holding it all together. And Daniel, whether it was real or not, he gave me that for a moment. But that moment cost me more than I was prepared to lose. Now, every glance from Mark feels like a lie. Every I love you feels like an echo in an empty room. We're still married, still sharing a bed, still checking off the boxes. But we are miles apart. And I don't know how to close the distance anymore. Some nights I ask myself, if you were in my place, if you felt unseen, untouched, unheard, would you have said yes to that wish? Would you? Would you trade one moment of being wanted for the weight that never goes away? Because I did, and I carry that weight with me every single day. Have you ever been tempted to cross a line just because you felt invisible? Not unloved, not unwanted, just unseen. Like you're standing in a crowded room, waving your arms, screaming on the inside, but no one turns to look. Not even the person who once promised they'd never stop seeing you. I need to know, what would you have done in my place if someone made you feel like you mattered again? If someone reminded you of who you were before you became someone's wife, someone's mother, someone's shadow, would you have walked away? Or would you have done what I did? Would you have said yes just once? I'm not asking for pity or permission. I know I crossed a line. I live with that truth every day. But I also know I'm not the only one who's ever felt this way. That quiet ache, that longing, that craving to feel alive in a world that keeps asking you to disappear into the roles you're supposed to play. So tell me, have you ever made a choice that felt right for 1 second and wrong for every second after? I want to hear from you, your thoughts, your judgment, your stories, even your silence. Because sometimes just knowing someone else understands, that's enough. And if you felt the ache in this story, if something in it tugged at your heart, or whispered to a part of you that's been buried for years, subscribe to Heartfelt Tales Unfold. There are more stories like this, honest, raw, and real, waiting for you. Sometimes the things we do to feel alive end up killing parts of us we didn't know were still breathing. I said yes to one wish, just one, and I've been carrying its weight ever since. It didn't ruin my life, not in the dramatic movie scene kind of way, but it cracked something quietly, deeply, permanently. And now even the good moments feel different, tainted, like there's a shadow at the edge of every smile. Some secrets never stay buried. They live with you, change you, soften you in some places and harden you in others. And some wishes come with a price I'm still paying every single day.